Hello viewers and welcome to the Legal Talk Show, proudly brought to you by Say What, with support from the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe. And today we have a jam-packed show for you guys in the studio of choice as we discuss on the issues surrounding child pregnancy. Joining me in the studio are two beautiful and amazing guests who are going to introduce themselves to you so that you get to know them better. Starting with you, sir.
Hi everyone, my name is Victor. I'm a child rights practitioner.
Okay, and you?
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Sitachi Gwaze. I'm a student.
All right, and welcome to the Legal Talk Show.
Thank you.
So today we're going to be discussing on child pregnancy. So I think you guys can relate that last year we had so many cases concerning child pregnancy, and there was an uproar from the society, from the legal side, that what is happening in our country. And then as we went into 2023, one of the most saddening part is that we had a case on the 18th of January this year, and we're like, what's happening? We thought we had already dealt with these cases and we're walking into a new year and we're expecting good things and good vibes and all. But then we had a case from Kwekwe district in Midlands province of a Form 3 student who gave birth in class, right? And that same month here in January on the 26th, we had another case as well in Gokwe of a man who had raped a 15-year-old. So what are we really saying in legal terms in terms of child pregnancy? So for you, Victor, I would want to understand if you can tell us in brief what rape is, what child pregnancy is, so that we really understand these terms from a legal perspective.
All right, so rape is defined in the Criminal Code, which is the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act of Zimbabwe. It is defined as a crime where a man unlawfully and intentionally has sexual intercourse with a woman without your consent.
Okay.
So that is how we define rape within Zimbabwe. It is a gender-specific crime, which means it can only be committed by a man against a woman.
Okay.
Of which, at the same time, in the same vein, if you want to define child rape, child rape is one of the worst forms of human rights violations against children. Child pregnancy, because first of all, children should not be falling pregnant. Children should not be forced into having sex because most of these children are below the age of consent in the first instance. So we regard that as a form of rape. And when that happens, child rape, child pregnancy, all of those are gross human rights violations against children.
Okay, amazing. And there's this one saying that says, regai zive shiri mazai hana mutu. So I think that really works in terms of addressing these things as well. So I'd like to understand from you, Staff, from your own perspective, what you think child rape is.
Well, as I had already mentioned, I feel like a child rape is actually violating a young child that is below the consent, that is not supposed to be engaging in the sexual relations. Actually, yeah, I mean, violating in terms of saying you had sexual relations with this person without their consent and is they are below the age consent.
Okay, so in terms of consent, let me divert a bit. Maybe Victor, you can help us answer that. So I was saying that a child who is below the age of 18 can actually give consent to sexual activity, which is going to be maybe perpetrated by somebody else, or on a normal circumstances, they've got no right even to say yes or no.
I mean, from previous discussions, you would know that the current legal position in Zimbabwe is that the age of consent is at 16. Although, the Constitutional Court gave a directive to say this must be amended to 18 so that, everything can also be aligned with 18 being the legal age of majority.
Okay.
So as it stands right now, a child below the age of 16 cannot consent to any form of sexual activity, not only sexual intercourse, but all forms of sexual activity. And that person will very soon change. I'm sure by May thereabout, the person will change to any child below the age of 18 should not be able to give any consent whatsoever to any form of sexual activity. So all these crimes against children, it doesn't matter what the age of the child is. At the end of the day, it is a violation of their human rights.
Okay. Yeah. I think maybe just for the benefit of our audience, though we are going to speak more to child pregnancy, which affects the girl child, maybe we can talk more about the boy child as well. What does it mean for a boy child?
Unfortunately, sexual violence against boys is one of those crimes that we don't really focus on. So I'm really happy that you brought that up, because there are so many instances where boys are being violated sexually, but then because society doesn't really have mechanisms for the boy child to report, it is seen as a form of weakness, for a young boy to come up and speak up about rape. But the reality is that these things are happening. Boys are being abused by elder women. Boys are being abused by elder men. Boys are being abused by boys, or other boys are also older than them. And these things are happening in our communities. And I think, just as you rightfully put it up, we should speak more about it. Yeah.
Okay, so another one for you again before we move on to Star.
Yeah.
All right, so what are some of the legislative gaps that are there in our country that are maybe we cannot say really encouraging these acts, but it's still happening, yet we have the law.
Yeah.
So what are some of the legislative gaps that are that are making these things continue happening all in all?
So our first challenge is that the law in Zimbabwe, with it relates to child rights, is very fragmented, in the sense that you end up finding the law about children in very different other legal instruments. So, for example, the Children's Act doesn't really fully define sexual crimes. Sexual crimes are defined within the Criminal Law, Codification and Reform Act. At the same time, the Legal Age of Majority Act is a separate act. There's the Constitution, on the other hand, saying something very different. We need to have a unified law. We need to have a law that fully zones in on the rights of children. We need to have a comprehensive Children's Act that incorporates, among other issues, the issues of the age of legal age of consent, the age of majority, at the same time, even sexual and reproductive health rights, because these are real rights. We shouldn't find them in a separate act for anything that concerns children. If they're children, then we should have one universal law that we can all refer to say, as long as a child, Section 42, Section 57 of the Children's Act defines this as well.
Okay, all right. And to you, Star, you're coming from the communities where it's happening. So what is your comment on the issues of child pregnancy?
Well, firstly, I think as a people, we need to stop glorifying intergenerational relationships. Yes, because see, it starts like that in some instances, whereby I say, okay, fine, I'm seeing my 55-year-old man and he's doing me good, he's getting me all sorts of things, right? And a young lady tends to actually condone such behavior when it's done to her, because she feels like, what if I get an iPhone? What if I get something from it? Let me just keep quiet, And then also we need to touch on that poverty line. In some instances, it's not a matter of that they are not seeing what's happening. It's abuse, they're seeing it. But think about it, you're actually staying in that person's home. For example, it's an uncle. You can't just jump and say, oh my God, he raped me, violated me, and then you're going to report it. Where are you going to stay? So these are the things that we need to take care of. The Zimbabwean community needs to guard against such things. What happens if someone is living is in poverty and they need assistance? In order for them not to be abused, what do we do as a country? Those are the things that we should look at.
Okay, interesting. All right. So Victor, you mentioned something interesting about the legal perspective of these issues. So I want to understand that since last year, people have been talking about aligning these acts to one. So I want to understand that. How long does it take? Because I think things are getting out of hand now.
You know what? At the end of the day, these things come down to what we call political will. And political will means the people who sit to make laws should have it within themselves to say this is a priority.
Okay.
For as long as they don't view this issue as a priority issue in terms of what is being tabled according to the law, then we can scream and shout all day if we want to, but then up until whoever is responsible for making the laws sits down to say we're crafting this law, then we can only wait. Remember, you and I are not the lawmakers. The lawmakers sit in Parliament. They are there. They are supposed to draft this act. The lawmakers is the Minister of Justice. They should sit there and make this a matter of priority. So all we can do maybe is just to push and advocate to say, listen, maybe from our perspective, it would be more beneficial for us to expedite the issues of having maybe a proper law that addresses the issues of children. So you and I need to make more noise about it.
Okay, and I believe that's why we are here to make noise about it. So yes, viewers, you are watching the Legal Talk Show, proudly brought to you by Say What, with support from the Swedish Embassy. Please do make sure you get in touch with us on our toll-free number, which is 577, for psychosocial support, SRHR solutions, and child protection services. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back soon. Hello viewers, and welcome back to the Legal Talk Show, proudly brought to you by Say What, with support from the Swedish Embassy. I'm your host, The Dynamite, and today we are discussing on issues surrounding child pregnancy. So in the studio I have Victor, and Victor, you're mentioning something interesting about us making noise in terms of addressing these issues. So I'd like to know, not from the legal perspective, from your own personal point of view, what's your comment on child pregnancy?
I mean, like I said earlier on, it is a gross human rights violation. I don't think we should even glorify it in any way.
Okay.
Kakawan and communities here, people say, and it's normal. You know, people make it sound like it's as normal.
Yeah.
And then you're thinking, but do you not realize what this means? You know. And so Kakawan, we also need to, you know, it comes down to how we look at these issues from a community perspective. Namskans or managa abuse or managa rape. We need to look at it that way, you know, because all it means is that there's a man somewhere who took advantage of this kid who's informed true. That's what it means, you know, and let's just define it as that.
As that.
Yeah.
Maybe just for the benefit of the audience, if someone akabatwa achinze arepa mwana and goes to the court of law, is there like a certain sentence here, no pure, or it's different?
So, I mean, ideally for me, they should get the highest sentence.
Okay.
But unfortunately, you know, court functions a bit differently from our day-to-day layman's perspective. So they're what we call mitigating circumstances. So which means a person is allowed to come in and then give maybe factors to prove that this is not rape, or factors to say, but that's going to 16 years, in the 22 years. So me, I was laboring under the impression that she's 22. Yeah. You know, and then that is an error that in court, you know, it can be argued. So sure, don't prove it. Maybe there's a text message, I can't say I'm 22. Then that can be proof. At the same time, sometimes it's, you know, Romeo and Juliet relationships. Those are tricky because the boy can be 15, the girl can be 16 or 14 or whatever, you know. And then in those circumstances, do you really define that as rape? Because this was consensual sex among non-consenting minors. Okay. So that is also a very tricky and grey area, you know. Okay. Sometimes it's also I mean, there's a whole different way of looking at these things, you know. Isusu must chiti munaka repio. But now when you look at the facts before the court, sometimes it can be a very different you know, like set of dynamics and circumstances. Okay. So in the end, in the sentencing, there's no one, you know, there's no one sentence cast in stone to say it's 20 years, because there will always be other circumstances around the incident.
Okay, interesting. Thank you so much for that, Victor. And recently we were commemorating the International Day of Education. And I feel like in these circumstances, we are robbing her of your future. So I'd like to understand from your own point of view, Star, what do you think about the effects of child pregnancy in terms of education for the girl child?
Honestly, I feel like it leads to brain death. We lose a lot of doctors, a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists. Maybe someone who could have brought us the COVID-19 vaccine is actually robbed out because of this. Why am I saying so? You know, we tend to say to people, even if you do get a child, even if you do have a child, at the end of the day, you'll excel. You know, you'll make it in life. Yes, but not like you were going to without that child, because now you have other responsibilities. Now you have parenting to look at and all that. So I think particularly this leads to brain death. It affects you gravely.
Okay, and it's so bad that this generation we are getting robbed every day of people who are capable of making decisions that will put us on the next level. So Victor, what are some of the recommendations that you can give to our policymakers in terms of addressing this issue?
Criminalize any form of sex with a child. Okay. It's not complicated. You know, sometimes we like complicating very simple things. Sex with a child is wrong, criminalize it. They make sure that perpetrators of this are punished. in that way it can deter other people who would have maybe thought I can take advantage of a child from from perpetrating such acts. I was reading recently, online, that the Mozambican government banned a religious sect because it was promoting child marriage and child pregnancy and that. That is a very forward way of thinking. If you have an institution that is promoting that form of gross human rights violations against a child, then we should really set up to act. But how many times? Because we've spoken about this so many times. We've seen the past year children dying in shrines. We've made noise. It made national news, international headlines. Nothing is being done. So at the end of the day, up until we stand up to say, well, this is a criminal act, and we're going to act against it, we'll forever have perpetrators of this, and we'll forever sit here and discuss. So the long and short of it is criminalize all manner of sex with a child.
Okay, so let me just give you a case study from what I've been observing. If I may say that it's a case that came in recently. So this is a minor who got raped by an uncle. We are staying in the same house, and then they went to report to the police station, and then the uncle was taken by the law enforcement authorities, and then in less than a month, the uncle was released. So how then do we help young, these girls to cope in such an environment whereby even if we report, nothing is being done?
Yeah, so first of all, we need to interrogate why when we report nothing has been done, because we need to know, Albert Nyati said, we need to know the source of the cloud that doesn't bear water. Okay. We need to know why is it like that? Why is it that I can walk in and report, and then when I report, someone is just let scot-free? Then let's interrogate that. That's where our first problem is. But then the other issue is to do with, mental health. Can we be a bit more intentional about it? Okay. Mental health is not just sitting down to say, no, there's depression. So I cannot look at that depression. You must wake back in the morning, because some of these things, trauma is a lifelong process that needs lifelong solutions to heal. So you can also have maybe mechanisms, institutions in place, that can really address the issues of mental health against, affecting victims of sexual violence. So I'd really push to say, even within the civil society movement, there's a lot of partners, who are sort of like providing these services, but we need professionals who can do that, and we need to be, also from an empathy, from a point of empathy, to really sit down with these children and then care enough to follow through with the counseling and mental health sessions that they have.
Okay, interesting. And to you, Star, as a young person, how do such cases affect you, and what do you hope to see change? And also, maybe you can also tell us more about maybe your community, where you're coming from, if there are cases that resonates to what we are discussing today.
Well, I feel like the world, the community, it's all failing us. And as a girl child, you want to go to the workspaces out there and have a fellow lady to lean on, a fellow lady to work with. But hey, we don't see most of that because some of our peers, they're already down and out because of such, right? So personally, I feel like what is important right now is SRHR to be mandatory in schools. Because also, the other thing that I've noted, especially from the community that I come from, is that you realize that some of those people don't actually understand that it's abuse. I'm Ndebele. Umuntu uyabanjwa amathangazi. And you think, okay, he just did this. She doesn't even know it's wrong. You understand? And also, I think when child pregnancies, when we see such, we need to ask ourselves, what exactly happens? Did we see forms of violence? Did you see forms of abuse? What was she saying? What did she communicate? Right? All of that, and put it together and say, no, this has to stop. If the law is failing us, or whatever the system is failing us, then there's the people who ought to go and say, hey, this baby used to say this. This young girl used to say this about you. So we know you were touching her, right? You were doing this and it is wrong. And by doing that as a community, we change a lot of things. Because remember, back in the day, we never had this law. You know, when you had a child and the law being rulers, we didn't necessarily have lawyers, right? We didn't necessarily have the judiciary system. But there wasn't lawlessness, do you understand? So as a community, we can still deal with it by doing such, acting upon such.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Star. And to you, Victor, do you think that the civic organizations are doing much to address this issue?
Yes and no. Yes, in the form that we've seen, you know, a lot of social media advocacy, I think, around these issues. So we are very quick to issue press statements. We are very good at that. You write your fancy English, those big words. Sometimes we're like, hey, bro, like, what does this mean? You know?
Yeah.
But not much in terms of interventions within at grassroots level. And this is where we are lacking.
Okay.
Because we can sit and discuss policy all we want. But then policy must then cascade to the beneficiary, who is the little girl who get through deep in some slum or some very remote area. At the same time, even for the young boy, the same thing. You know, they should have access to that information that we are busy, you know, parenting, while you know, in our other forums and everything. So we can do better. You know, I've always maintained. I don't know why civil society organizations believe that their budgets must go for meetings in hotels. Doesn't make sense to me. You know, we need to push advocacy. You know, weight matters. Let's go to the community and let's go and educate whoever needs to be educated about these issues. You know the information, but you must pass it down.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think we get a very wonderful session. And yes, viewers, you're watching the Legal Talk Show, proudly brought to you by Say What and supported by the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe, as we were discussing on issues surrounding child pregnancy. And please, it is very key that you report these issues so that we make sure that our generation lives very free, and also make sure that our girl child goes out there to explore and become whatever she wants to become at the end of the day. All right. And it's also very important that you also take note that as young people, we also need to be aware of what's happening within our societies so that we can be able to address it to the policymakers as well. And yes, viewers, you are watching the Legal Talk Show. So right about now, from me, the Dynamite, and the crew behind the scenes, it's goodbye.